We're now moving on to the management of operations, and in presentation 1 we're going to look at the role of operations and inventory management. So the learning intentions: to be aware of the role of operations, to understand what an operating system is, to distinguish between the different inventory levels, to draw and understand an inventory control diagram, understand the use of computerised inventory control, describe the consequences of holding too much or too little inventory, understanding the factors that we take into account when choosing a supplier, and we're going to have a wee look at logistics. This was covered at National 5, so we're just touching on it again. So what is the role of operations? I always say it's kind of broken up into 3 or 4 different sections. It's all about buying the inventory, so what inventory to buy and who you're buying it from, how much you're going to buy, etc. Along with that, you've got to look at controlling your inventory. So along with purchasing, you've got to look at inventory control, ensuring that you've got enough inventory available and how you should store it and how it should be accessed. We then look at systems themselves, and this is how you're going to produce your product. That's going to depend on the staff you require, how talented or how skilled they are, and the method of production you're going to use. And finally, when you are producing the product, it's really important to make sure that you're ensuring quality is consistent throughout. So we look at different methods of ensuring quality. So an operating system then is your input, process, output, and it's the way in which the process is carried out from changing a raw material into a finished good. And in operations, when it comes to the manufacturing process, that's what we're really doing. We're changing raw materials through a process and bringing out a final finished good or service. So the inputs would be things like your raw materials, your labour force, any equipment you need, machinery, etc., finance to buy these things. The manufacturing is going to change the raw materials or adapt them into some kind of output, which is your finished good or service. This little video clip here on this next slide, the link is here to take you to the operating system at Amazon, and it's a really interesting watch, so make sure you have a look at it. So we're looking at inventory levels then, and what we have to do here is marry these up with the inventory control diagram, which for a higher question based on inventory levels, I would suggest that you're able to draw the diagram. Common questions for this are normally describe the features of an effective inventory management system. And what they're really wanting you to do here is look at all the different levels that are involved. And as I say on the next slide, I will show you the inventory control diagram and explain it a little bit better to you. So first and foremost, we have our maximum, sometimes called economic inventory level. Now be very careful when you're describing these in a question. The maximum level is not the maximum level of inventory you would have, because all you're doing really is just using the words and playing around with them. The best way to do this is to describe it by saying the level above which inventory should not rise. If you just say the maximum inventory level is the maximum amount of inventory you should have, you'll not be given a mark for it. So the best way to say that is the level above which your inventory should not rise. So for every single product that you have on your shelves, you will have a maximum inventory level, which means you've decided that's the amount of space you need for that product. We know how fast we go through the inventory, so we know how much our maximum should be. The minimum is the opposite, and that's the level below which your inventory should not fall. So you will have a minimum level, which you'll see as I say on the next graph. There will be a level where you know it's time to kick in a new order. So this is the level that your inventory reaches when you have to order more of it. The quantity, the reorder quantity, is the amount you will order at that level. Now, the reorder quantity is found by taking your maximum level and taking away your minimum level, and that will be your reorder quantity. You're reordering enough inventory to take you right back up to the maximum level again, which once again you'll see on the diagram. The lead time is the time it takes between you ordering the new inventory and the inventory arriving. So that's what we call lead time, the difference between the order being placed and the inventory arriving. And finally, we've got our buffer inventory, and that's the level of inventory below your minimum level, which allows you to take account of emergencies when maybe your inventory can't get through for some reason or another. So this diagram here, you should be able to draw. On this diagram, we can see that our maximum level of inventory is 500 units. That's the green horizontal line. Our minimum is the 100, which is the orange horizontal line. Now, anything underneath that 100 the space from 0 to 100, what we call that is buffer inventory. So the 0 to 100, in there you've got your buffer. The 100 is your minimum inventory level. The green is your maximum inventory level, the 500. At 300, that's the reorder level. It's the kind of broken sort of purpley colour. And that's your reorder level. So what you've got to be careful about here is it's not a totally jaggy line. The jaggy line, it goes down from left to right, and then it goes straight back up when your new inventory arrives. So if we follow the first diagonal line down, you're starting off with your maximum of 500 units, and over a space of 4 weeks we're looking at here if you look at the horizontal. Over the course of the 2 weeks, it's being used up, it's being used up, it's being used up. When it reaches the 300, that's when the new inventory order is going to kick in, your reorder level. So at 300, you're going to reorder, and you're going to reorder the difference between max and min, which is 400 units. So at that level, at the 2 week stage here, you're going to put an order in for this product of 400 units, because that's the difference between maximum and minimum. Now, why is that? Because over the next 2 weeks, you are going to be using up that inventory. And you've decided your lead time is going to be 2 weeks. The difference between the order being placed at 2 weeks and the order arriving at 4 weeks. So it's a 2 week lead time you have here. You're still using up your inventory, right down to it reaches the minimum level at week 4. When you receive your 400 units in, that's going to take you straight back up to the 500. So it's a diagonal line and then a straight line back up. And the same is going to happen over the course of the next 4 weeks, from weeks 4 to 8. At week 6, the new order is going to kick in. A new reorder quantity of 400 units is going to be ordered at the 300 units after week 6, which is going to take you up to week 8 till it arrives, lead time being 2 weeks, and then it goes straight back up again. Okay, it's really, really important that you can draw this diagram and you can label all the parts of it, because sometimes in this question, describe the features of an effective inventory management system. They will ask you to help explain what you're talking about by drawing a diagram, and a number of marks are going to be allocated to that. Okay, so we're now going to look at understocking, and understocking is where you generally have too little stock and you can't meet orders. So we're going to look at that before we look at overstocking, which is having too much inventory. Now, these are all problems. Understocking is a problem, overstocking is a problem. So if you're asked to describe the effects of understocking or overstocking, they are going to be issues, they're not going to be good things. So on this slide here, we've got a number of points. It's difficult to cope with changes in demand. If you don't have enough stock or enough inventory, then you're not going to be able to deal with more people wanting to buy something, or more inventory having to be issued. Late deliveries of materials might result in your inability to meet orders. Because you are understocking, you've not got enough, you really rely on your orders coming in time. If these orders are late, then you won't be able to meet your order, either manufacture the product, or when the product comes in, reallocate it to your consumer or your retailer. It's more difficult to cope with shortages in materials. So if there's an issue with a shortage of materials for some strange reason, then by understocking, you're going to have even more hassle trying to get a hold of these materials, because there's already a shortage of them and you're not stocking enough of them. You may have to order more often, which leads to you having more waiting time, more admin costs, more delivery costs, and having to place orders. And what you've got to be careful about is your reputation may suffer if orders are not met on time, which could lead to your customers going to an alternative, a competitor. Overstocking, on the other hand, is where you're holding too much stock, and that in itself can cause problems. Your storage costs are higher because you're having to find more storage space to store the extra stock or inventory. It takes up space you could be using for something that's more important, that you've got more of it. Maybe there's a product that's now come into high demand and you maybe have to increase your maximum level. Then you can't do it because you've not got the space to do that, because you're overstocking other products. Your money is being tied up in inventory. This is money tied up in products that you're not using and you're not going to be using for a while. You could be using that money for something else. There's a problem of deterioration. It could be they're perishable items, in which case they may not be as good as they once were because they're sitting in the storage room for too long. They could go out of fashion. We call this obsolescence, or going obsolete. It could no longer be that, for example, a printer cartridge fits the printer now because you don't have them anymore, they've gone out of stock. It could be clothes that are no longer fashionable, so you can't sell them. That's you just wasted money. And the longer the product is stored, the higher the chance of theft. It tends to be proven that if an organisation has a large number of products in stock, people may find it easier to steal because they feel that one would be missing. Whereas if you've not got very much of something, then it's more difficult to steal because it's more likely to be noticed. We're now moving on to the factors to consider when you're choosing a supplier. So how do you decide that you're choosing that supplier for your inventory? It could be that they've got a good quality, their products, their inventories of a good quality. It could be the price is reasonable. Now what you've got to remember here is the cheapest isn't always the best, because the cheapest could lead to a quality that's maybe not ideal. The reliability of the supplier. If you have this inventory control system in place, you have to know what your lead time normally is with this supplier, so you need to know they're reliable. Do they offer you any discounts? Do they offer you time to pay? Do they offer you a discount if you pay on time or you pay early? Are they capable of supplying the amount you need? So it may be they're a small supplier and they're not able to supply in the quantities you're looking for, so you've got to look out for that as well. And their location is really important as well. So for example, if you're relying on a supplier based in China, for example, and you're in the UK, then you know there is going to be a longer lead time because the products have got to come into the country. So where your supplier is located is going to determine very much how quickly you can get access to your product and how long your lead time is going to be. And finally, related to that, the time it takes to deliver products, and that's going to be related to where the supplier is located. You've got to be careful that if you are looking for products in a time scale, that your supplier is able to deliver the products when they say they can, and that would lead to them maybe being closer to you. When we're talking about inventory control, it's quite important to talk about computerised inventory control, and this is the way that lots of larger businesses do this nowadays. Previously, what businesses would do was they would close the shop or close the organisation, for the warehouse or whatever, for a day or a few days to have a stock take. And this stock take would be done manually by staff. At that stage, the business isn't earning because they're not selling anything. So it does cost them. They're still employing staff to do stock takes. So by using spreadsheets, where you can actually have formulae already set up in your spreadsheet, and in your storeroom, when a department in the organisation maybe takes so many units of a particular item of stock, it's automatically entered into a spreadsheet, so they have a running balance of how much inventory they have in stock. It can be a lot more complex than that, and you can have a system in place where when an item of stock has been sold on, then automatically it's taken from an electronic point of sale system, and in place there can be a system where stock will automatically be reordered at the reorder level. So what are the good things about that? Well, balances are constantly being updated even if you use spreadsheets. You can have it linked to tills through electronic point of sale, which is what a lot of the supermarkets do, and places like Argos. The minute one product has been beeped out through its barcode to be sold, then what that means is they know at every stage how much inventory they have in stock. What it doesn't account for, I have to say, is for stealing, because they've obviously not been beeped through the system. Automatic reordering can take place with this system. So the supermarkets, when they reach their reorder level for, say, ketchup, for example, then what will happen is a new order will be placed with their warehouse. So the Morrison's warehouse, for example, know that more ketchup is required at the Johnston branch, say. The next one there is it can highlight regional variations in inventory. Inventory might sell better in some areas than others, or worse in some areas than others. So it may be, for example, some of your luxury products may not sell in areas where there's maybe a bit more deprivation or whatever. So it can show you that maybe those levels require lower inventories being held in that particular branch compared to other ones where you maybe need to hold higher. levels of inventory. And it also highlights seasonal shifts as well. Certain areas or certain countries, for example, may find that at certain seasons more of a product sells than others, and that's quite important too. It can also be a theft deterrent if people know that it's being computerised, then they know that maybe they feel as though they shouldn't maybe be stealing. However, it doesn't put everyone off, but there is a possibility that it could be a theft deterrent. The problems with it are they cost a lot of money to install and maintain these computerised systems, and you have to train your staff to operate the system effectively, and that takes money and time. There are a couple of links on this next slide here for a computerised inventory control to show you how it works, and the bottom one is showing you what a future inventory management would look like in a supermarket of the future, and as I say, it's quite interesting to see that. The next part we're going to look at here is we're looking at centralised and decentralised inventory storage, storing it in one place for the whole organisation, or a number of branches of the organisation to get to, or does each individual organisation or department hold their own? And we're also going to have a wee look here at just-in-time inventory management. So centralised storage of inventory is storing it in one place. So for example, with Morrison's, then they will have a centralised distribution outlet where all the products come from the manufacturers, and they will then distribute to branches. We call that centralised inventory control. In our school, it could be, it doesn't work this way, but it could be that we have a centralised storage area where different departments can access pens and paper, etc. As I say, it doesn't work that way, but that's what centralised means. What are the advantages of having a centralised inventory storage area? It's easier to maintain security because everything's in one place, and you will normally have someone in charge. And you can have similar procedures for receiving, issuing and distributing your inventory, which means it's more consistent throughout your department or throughout your branches. However, it's costly to set up and maintain. As I said, there's maybe normally someone in charge of it, so you're having to pay for an inventory management assistant being in the stockroom. And it's time consuming for staff to maybe get to and from the area, or for different branches of an organisation to get their inventory from a centralised distribution area. So working time could be wasted, or it can take up valuable time. Decentralised means that every department or every branch will hold its own inventory in its own area, and that means that staff can access the inventory more easily. There's less chance of it going to waste because you're ordering for yourself, so you're not ordering perhaps too much that doesn't get used. You know how much your branch or your department uses, and you can have your own input on the purchasing of inventory. So for example, in the school, the art department will be looking for different items of inventory from, for example, us in business and computing, from science, etc. So you can actually have an input into what you would like to purchase when it's decentralised. You're obviously requiring storage spaces in all these different locations, and it's more difficult to maintain security procedures. You'll tend to find that departmental or branch security isn't quite the same as it would be in a centralised area, and that leads to it being way more expensive. We're finally going to move on now to just-in-time, and just-in-time is a method of inventory management where you are actually not buying any inventory in until the customer has actually placed an order with you. So you have no need whatsoever for a storage area because you're not holding any storage. So if there's no demand for the product, there's no production. It's the anticipated or planned consumer demand that triggers the production process. When people want to place orders with you, that's when production starts. You'll find that finished goods are only produced just in time to be sold to the consumer. And if the production process requires component parts, they'll be assembled just in time to become finished goods. So for example, with a car, there'll be different parts of a car. They'll not be made until the customer demands the product. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of just in time? Inventory is not wasted because you're not buying it until it's required. You've not got money tied up in inventory, so that means you can use the money for other things. There's no warehousing, so that also saves costs. And the business is responsive to more changing external factors. So if tastes or fashions or whatever change, technology changes, then you've not got the issue of holding on to inventory that's maybe now become outdated. If deliveries are late, this is a problem. The business will face the consequences. So you have very, very much got to have reliance on and relationships, as the next one says, with your suppliers for it to work effectively. There has to be a short lead time. The minute you're looking for raw materials or whatever, your supplier has to get those raw materials packaged up and sent to you as quickly as possible, because the customer's waiting for their order. And it also relies on good infrastructure. So there has to be a good network, whether it's road network or whatever, in place to get the supplies to you as quickly as possible, even to outlying areas, so that you can get the product manufactured in time for the consumer. And there's no room for error in production. You are only ordering what you need. So if there's a mistake in production, then you have to go back to your supplier and order more, because you will not have any inventory stored at all. And that's what we call just in time. Be aware of the pros and cons, because you could be asked to discuss the use of just in time, which means you have to show advantages and disadvantages of this procedure. And this is just a little video link here from the bbc.co.uk on just-in-time production, so that's where a little watch. Now, we discussed logistics, i.e. methods of distribution, road, rail, sea and air at National 5. We talked also about this in marketing, so we're not going to spend too much time on it again, but logistics deals with the distributing of inventory to your different organisations. Logistics staff will have an awareness of the supply chain, so they know how to liaise with the suppliers of the raw materials, the manufacturers, retailers and even consumers. Technology plays a huge part in logistics nowadays by using automated systems and electronic methods of communication, so that we can keep note of tracking levels, delivery times. Even us as consumers, when we buy things now, we tend to find we get information on tracking, so you can see where your order is. Transport costs for the organisation and performance evaluation. So you may be asked to rate your logistics company when they come to you with a parcel, how effective it was. There's also got to be an awareness with logistics of the external factors, such as legislation. For example, drivers only being allowed to drive for a certain length of time. Fuel costs, how much fuel costs are at that time, because that's going to add to your delivery costs. And any environmental pressures. What's the weather like? Is the weather poor? Snow days? We think of the beast from the east, and how the logistics was really in a bit of a mess then, because organisations couldn't receive deliveries because of the snow, etc. So the methods were covered under marketing, and we talked about road, rail, sea and air. And this final slide here just gives you the advantages and disadvantages of each of them. It's useful to know, so make sure you have a look at these for here. Thank you.